the stories of our children getting opportunity to go to college and about mamas and daddies putting nickels and dimes and quarters together to pay tuition. It's about our stories. It's about the hardships and the pain and the suffering. It's about the protests and the marching. It's about the standing. It's about the legislation. It's about all of that. It's our story.
Witness to Grace, a testimony of favor, is a poignant, true life story that chronicles the remarkable journey of W. Franklyn Richardson, from humble and challenging beginnings to honored positions of power and global influence. Witness to Grace gives an intimate portrayal of the rise of one of the most respected religious and civil rights leaders of our time.
Well, hello, my name is Tim Clarke, and I'm the senior pastor here at First Church of God in Columbus, Ohio. And I have the extraordinary privilege, honor, and joy of interviewing my friend and my brother, the Reverend Dr. W. Franklyn Richardson, who's the pastor of the Great Grace Baptist Church there in Mount Vernon, New York. And I just am so excited about this opportunity, not only just to share with him, but also to interview him. Now, you have to be old and from New York to know what I'm about to say. I feel like Gil Noble. I'm getting ready to interview this brother, one of the strongest brothers on the block. And he's just written a new book, which is in some ways autobiographical, talks about his journey and his pilgrimage, but it is also, I feel, a treatise on the current climate and condition that is in our country. And so I'm excited to share with him today. The title of this book, this autobiography, sociological analysis, is Witness to Grace, a testimony of favor. And I think the title is so appropriate, so apt, because of what the subject matter deals with. Doc, welcome. Thanks for taking time. This is sort of like an Advent moment. You have condescended to dwell.
No, Doc. I've been lifted up. I've been exalted to come to the apostles' office.
Oh man, it's an honor. It's an honor.
Good to be here with you.
We go way back.
Yes, sir.
As I said, I'm a native New Yorker, and I remember when you were called.
My.
And Booth and I used to laugh about there were certain men who, when they hit a city, the city shook. And when you came from Philadelphia through Virginia and then to New York, this is no lie, man, the city shook. You were young and you were bold, articulate and dynamic, and New York has not been the same. So I just want you to talk to us a little bit about this book, this unfolding of the saga of your life, and what made you put pen to paper to start telling this story.
Well, let me start right there. First of all, let me thank you for having me and for sharing with me. I really appreciate it. It's also a great joy to reacquaint with an old friend and to stay in touch with you.
Amen.
And so I'm proud of your ministry and what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'll start right there. I came upon this. You know how in your life you say to yourself, I'm going to one day write down my journey. And about 3 years ago, I had major surgery, which came out very successful, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment that I said, well, it's time for me to stop saying I'm gonna do it, go ahead and do it. And so I began to reflect on what was I going to say about my life and how was I gonna approach it? And in my reflection, the dominant thing that came up to me as I went through episodes in my reflection was the constancy it kind of stirred off to me was the issue and the notion of God's grace.
Wow.
And I saw grace all along my journey, from its very beginnings to its mountains and its peaks, to good days and bad days. I saw the grace of God. And then, so I began to bring my thinking around writing or looking back at my life through the prism of grace.
Yes, sir.
You know, seeing where I'd been, what I'd done, and being able to acknowledge and point out where God's grace had functioned in my journey for the purpose of sharing it to those who would come after my path and could benefit from my reflection, whether they are clergy, whether they're doctors or lawyers or just good believers.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I reflected, and because I have benefited from those who have preceded me.
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, somebody would say, well, what would be the most significant contribution in your journey as you reflect? I would have to tell you that God placed by his grace extraordinary mentors all along my journey. And those mentors helped me to navigate through the terrain of my unfolding life in ministry as a pastor, and I'm indebted to them. And so having such a sense of debt, I felt that it was important that I make a contribution. And so I began writing the book through the prism of grace. Now, I do not mean grace in the narrow sense of a theological treatise on sin, but in the broader sense, in the cosmological sense of that every human being is the recipient of God's grace, from the rising of the sun to the dancing moon against the night, to the stars, to the air we breathe, to the food we eat. All of it is a gift from God. We didn't buy the sun. We didn't buy our parents, and whatever experiences we didn't buy, they're there by the grace of God. And so that has informed every page of what I have written, that notion of grace. And I've had a front row seat to God's grace in my life.
Wow, that's powerful. In fact, I was going to ask you to give us a definition of grace. And so you stopped right where I wanted to start, because the universal nature of grace is not something that belongs to a select segment or a particular people. It is universal in its application and appropriation. And I think it's fitting that yours has been a journey of grace, and it led you to a place called grace.
That's right. It might have highlighted my sensitivity to that notion.
Yes,
because even in my church, I've been pastor now for going on 46 years.
Wow.
And that whole journey has been kissed by the grace of the people of that congregation. And they have been a partner in everything I've done. And they've undergirded me in every pursuit that I've had. And that is a function of grace.
That's powerful. I want to ask you a couple of questions around the role of the church in our community, in our culture, particularly at this particular time. I want to do that, though. You teed up a ball for me, so I want to swing at it by talking about the mentors in your life. And I know certainly the late Dr. Sanji Frederick Ray, who was one of my preaching heroes as a kid. Being around him, certainly Dr. T.J. Jemison, and others, even Dr. Dixon there, when you came to that.
That's right.
Who was an icon and a titan then. Those men, and you talk about them and your dad and others, clergy and non-clergy, poured so much into you that informed and formed who you are. Before I raise the questions about the role of the Black church, help us understand on your grace pilgrimage, how those men and women poured into your life that which became the cement and the foundation for who you are and what you do.
You are so on point. The way I view it, whatever I am today is a consequence of the mentoring that I've had. And it's so valuable to me that I'm concerned about what's happening in the Black church today, where many young preachers think that they can get all that they need to be a pastor from the academy.
Yes, sir.
When in fact, part of what makes a rounded pastor is receiving the experiences and wisdom of those who have gone before you in the context of mentoring.
Yes, sir.
And we are losing that, and I hope we can return to it as a people and as pastors in church. Now, the people who worked with me on my journey from the very beginning, my greatest mentor was my mother. She escorted me to faith in Jesus Christ.
Yes, sir.
But then there came my pastor, my first pastor, James Hamlin in Philadelphia, who was the one who gave me the license and introduced me to ministry. And then it was the A.B. James,
Yes,
who
sir.
was president of Virginia Union, who kind of took me on and insisted in preparation, where I might have laxed at some point. He made intervention.
Yes, sir.
On my behalf.
Yes, sir.
And then from there was, as you said, Sandy Frederick Ray. I met Sandy Ray when I came to New York. What gave me entree to Sandy Ray is that he was married to Cynthia Ray.
Yes, sir.
Whose son and I were at West Philadelphia High School together in Philadelphia. And when she found that out, she embraced me and brought me right in. And I got access to Dr. Ray, and he and I connected, and the bond was so powerful.
Wow.
I wrote I edited and put together his book, Journey Through the Jungle, and then did the galley proofs, brought him back to him, had him approval. He never saw the finished book. He only saw the galley proofs. He died after I got the galley proofs. He died the following Easter. So he was such a great guy, man. Yes. We ride around in the back of his car with his chauffeur. His chauffeur at that time had a cap on, Tim, and a big old beautiful Lincoln.
Yes,
and,
sir.
We ride. He said, "Rich, you're gonna be a great fella." I said, "What do you mean, Dr. Ray?" He said, "Because you hang out with old fellas, you're gonna be a great fella." And so he was such a charming guy. Yes, and then I just talk about the function of mentoring. When he died, I spoke at his funeral, the minister's tribute.
Yes,
and
sir.
I was reluctant to do it because he was so great, and the pastors all over the country loved him.
Sir.
And I felt so inadequate. I was a student at Yale at the time, so inadequate to talk about giving the minister's tribute to Sandy Ray. Gardner Taylor was to preach the eulogy.
Yes, sir.
So I saw Gardner prior to at the house. I went up to him. I said, "Dr. Taylor," I said, "You know, Miss Ray asked me to preach the thing. I don't feel adequate to do that." And he said, "Franklyn, you do what she asked you to do."
Yes, sir.
And I remember when I went to her, when she came to me and asked me to do it, I said, "Miss Ray, I can't do that." And I'll never forget this, Doctor. It's in the book.
Yes, sir.
She said, I said, "I can't do this, Miss Ray. It's not." She quickly snapped at me and said, "Do you know the importance of a moment?"
I remember that in the book, boy. That was powerful.
Doc, that has stuck with me, Doc, all these years. So she mentored in a way, and so was Dr. Ray and Gardner Taylor. And then I came to, in touch with Bill Harvey. I did the foreign mission thing.
Yes,
he was Secretary of Foreign Mission.
Yes.
And I went to Africa with him. And coming back, we got in the conversation talking about, I asked, how do you get to move up in the National Baptist Convention? I was a pastor at Grace.
Yes.
And he said, "Well, you need to connect to T.J. Jefferson." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, he's going to be the next president. He's the secretary now. He's going to be the next president." And he said, "And you can get into him because he's a Virginia Union graduate." And I said, "Oh, really? Okay." So he said, "You go." He gave me a prescription, how to invite him, what to do, how to entertain him.
Yes, sir.
And we became, Dr. Johnson and I became quick friends. And he had me come to Baton Rouge to preach and so forth. And then when he came back on another trip to New York, my wife had a big dinner at the house for him, and we invited preachers over. He wasn't declared as a candidate. It was pretty well known he was. And I got to know him, and I helped him get elected. And when it was time for the election, I won't bore you with these details. When it was time for the election, his friend in college, A. Lincoln James, the brother of A.B.
Out of Virginia. Yes, sir.
That's his father. A. Lincoln James in Chicago.
He was in Chicago. That's right.
So A. Lincoln James said to me, Senior, A. Lincoln James said to me, Rich, me and TJ agreed that I would be secretary when he got to be president. He said, but it's taking too long, and he needs a young man to be president. And so that day, after the election, Dr. Jimison came to my wife, matter of fact, and said, how does it feel to be the wife of the secretary of the National Baptist Convention? And she said she was mind blown because he hadn't even spoken to me. He was telling her. And from that on, we got to be close friends. I walked with Dr. Jimison. He was such a blessing to me, probably one of the pronounced mentors in my life. And then subsequent to that, I had other mentors across it. Y.T. Walker was a critical mentor in my life.
Yes, sir.
We were like brothers and a father. You know, he was such a great guy.
You did his eulogy, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
At Canaan?
Yep. And so it was just those kind of people that shaped me, who are responsible for, to a large degree, the opportunities I had and the advice. Wyatt, I'm chairman of the board of National Action Network today. I've been there for 15 years. But when Wyatt left, I was vice chairman, and he recommended to the board that I become chairman. Wow. That's how I got to be chairman. And then I had a mentor in John Hurst Adams. I was involved in the ecumenical movement and the Conference of National Black Churches.
Yes.
And I worked under John Hurst Adams as vice chairman. When he retired, he recommended me to be chairman of the Conference of National Black Churches. So I guess if I have any favor, it's been the good fortune of having multiple navigators and people who have shaped me and made themselves available.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that has been my blessing.
Man, that is so powerful. And it's powerful for several reasons. And first and foremost, because it speaks to the impact and the influence of the hands of someone on yours to help shoot and direct the arrows of your life.
Yes, sir.
You know, there's that story in the Old Testament of the prophet who tells the king to shoot out the window, but he puts his hand on the hands of the young man and draws back the bow. And your life has been one of men and women who've helped in archery and the arc of your life. It also says something about how those influencers can direct our lives towards meaningful purpose.
Yes.
And then it says, and this is, as you said, I share your sorrow over this, that so many younger preachers don't see the benefit and the blessing of that now.
Yes, sir.
And they miss out on so much.
Yes, that's right.
We're living, I think any of us will realize and recognize, we're living in tumultuous and troubling times. Yeah. We have been hit with a pandemic, the likes of which we have not seen since 1917, 1918, and perhaps into a part of 1919. There's been political upheaval, and we see it now with this resistance to concede.
Yeah.
And there is also the public turmoil brought on by the body politic, police brutality, disenfranchisement of a large voting bloc, voter suppression. With all of that that's going on, you talked about Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, the Harlem Renaissance man. the late Dr. William Augustus Jones.
Oh, yes.
Men like that who were both pastoral and prophetic, who were in the pulpit and in the public square. What is the role of the church now, the Black church, in this moment?
Well, in many ways, Doc, the Black church as a social entity is in transition. It still has the capacity and the responsibility to provide entrance into the theological discussion. It still has an obligation to carry out the proclamation of the gospel, and the challenge for the church is to make itself relevant and approachable and acceptable to this generation that is a changing generation. There's so many things, so many influences have come upon the generation that the church has got to serve going forward, that the church is going to have to adjust. I mean, the impact of virtual and artificial intelligence, and virtual experiences, the amount of information that is in the culture that has to be discerned, the attitude of questioning that may be healthy, but it is certainly different. The church has never been under the kind of inspection that it is under today. The people in the pew today are much less accepting of what you have to say unless it can be backed up and proven. Don't give you much latitude in that regard. So the church gonna have to adjust to be accountable, more accountable. It's gonna have to be more relevant in terms of speaking to the lives of people. And it's probably gonna have to change. It's gonna also change the dynamics. I'm not certain what this virtual is gonna do to the idea of church buildings.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And to the idea of how often people gather for church.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I think it's a very challenging time for the church. And at the same time, the church needs to be involved in the social dynamic of justice for our people, for we are still victims of injustice.
Yes, sir.
And the church is still the only pure voice that speaks for African Americans and the plague of injustice that we have experienced and continue to experience. So the obligation to be more social conscious, I don't see how many churches will be able going forward to remain relevant and avoiding having a social consciousness. And we see that not just in the Black church, we see that in white churches that are going out of business.
Yes, sir. Because
they fail to have a relevant message, a relevant approach to people's lives. So I think it's a very challenging thing. I don't think we have an automatic solution to it. I think we're going to have to navigate our way through this and use our best thinking and talk to each other and bring young people in, get their perspective, open up and be accessible for them to help us shape this thing called the church. I think the times in which we live are so changing that they have their effects on every institution.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're absolutely right. I don't think there's an institution that has remained either untouched, and then I'm going to use a word that may sound a bit odd, or unscathed.
Yes.
And what you raised a moment ago about our white brothers and sisters, particularly in the evangelical church. Even just recently, the presidents of 6 or 7 Southern Baptist seminaries have come out against the idea of critical race theory and have sought to debunk it and dismiss it. And as a result of that, there are those who are really looking at that representation, that branch of Zion, and wondering where they are going and what relevance and what prophetic authority do they have? And so you're right, there was a time, especially in our experience, the African-American faith journey in North America, when if Reverend said it, that was enough. Dog, is not that way anymore.
That ain't gonna work no more, Doc.
Listen, they Googling while you preaching.
That's right.
Checking you.
That's right.
They are fact checking you while you preaching.
Now, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm talking about. And that's a change, Doc.
Yes, a change.
And it's gonna change, and it's gonna change the institution. It's gonna make the church more accountable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the pulpit. You feel it will also make the pulpit more accountable?
Without question. Well, the pulpit is going to definitely be more accountable because,
yes, sir.
Like I said, access to information, immediacy of it, how fast they can get it.
Yes, sir.
How open the society is, the duplicity of the pulpit is an open access today.
Yes, sir.
Because of the technology. You understand?
Our folk have access to the same resources we do. Reverend, they reading what we read.
That's right, Doc. That's right.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Let me ask you this. We are a people who have come a road that has often been circuitous and tortuous. Mm-hmm. And much of it was done through protest, marching, what some would even call civil disobedience, even though people looked at Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy and Dr. Shuttlesworth, people like that, as passive and non-resistant. They didn't understand really the whole idea, Thoreau's thing of civil disobedience. Sure. We see it now with Black Lives Matters this past spring and summer. So talk to me about how you see the church responding to a theology of protest.
Well, first of all, to be historically accurate, the overwhelming majority of Black churches never supported Martin Luther King when he was living.
There you go. Say that twice. Yes, sir.
So that notion that Black churches are unified on a social agenda. The only unification is that they all we equally benefit.
Right. Yes, sir.
From a social justice agenda, but we don't equally participate in that agenda. And so we have churches today who have never had a sense of pursuit of justice and have never considered it their issue. And I think so that is not new. And there are young people who are in this Black Lives Matter movement who will be embraced by some church leaders and church people. But that's normative. That is not abnormal. So I think that the churches who engage in activities that help liberate, empower, and educate our people will benefit with the new crowd.
Yes, sir.
And there'll be less tolerance for churches unengaged than there were during Martin Luther King's time.
Yes, sir. Yes,
the church is not going to get a pass. The Black church is not going to get a pass of by being engaged. Yes, sir. And Black people are going to call them out.
Yes, sir.
They're going to call out churches that are not participating in the empowerment of our people, and whose prism to Christ is such that it does not call for them or mandate them to participate in social justice.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So I think that's part of this change you and I are talking about, this transition that's going on. And I think that the church is going to be accountable for that, just as the white church and evangelicals you mentioned have always been provided hospitality to white supremacy.
Yes, sir.
And white nationalism and Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, sir.
They was always in those churches, sitting on the front pews, affirming the plantation operation during the week and celebrating Jesus. And I don't never know who that Jesus is that they have. I never met that Jesus.
I never met him.
Never met him.
He's not in the scriptures. I don't know who he is, but he's not in the canon. I know that. He's not in the Old Testament. If you read the prophecies about him, that's not the Jesus. He's certainly not the ones we see in the Gospels or who the writers of the epistles talk about. It is a Jesus of their own making.
Social intervention.
There you go. And historical revisionist.
That's right. That's revisioning, yes.
Wow.
So that's where that church is. And that's why I'm not, it's a whole big blanket called Christian church.
Yes, sir.
And there are segments in it that appeal to justice and right, and there are others who are co-conspirators to oppression.
Yes, sir.
All under the same banner.
Yes, sir. One of the things that I often think about relative to what you are saying about how Black clergy, men and women in ministry in our context, will of necessity be held to a higher standard of engagement and involvement. I often think of men like Dr. Ray and Dr. Taylor and others. I remember Dr. Walter Stockholm Penn at the Calvary Baptist Church in Jamaica.
Right.
He would have SCLC Sunday every year.
Yeah.
Dr. King would come, and then Dr. Abernathy would come after Dr. King's martyrdom. The preachers in New York, Dr. Penn, and people like that, those people they were up north. They were doing well in the north. They were on the East Coast. They always said two things every Black preacher wanted to be: a New York preacher or a Philadelphia preacher.
Yeah, that's right.
And so these men were in New York and they were in Philadelphia, but they raised money for the movement.
That's right.
They weren't down, they couldn't go down there. They didn't live there anymore, but they saw that their churches up north,
right,
NAACP Sunday, becoming lifetime members of the NAACP, supporting SCLC. And so even today, Black preachers are going to have to find a way to be engaged and involved. Talk to us about that for a minute.
Well, I serve as chairman of the board of National Action Network with Reverend Sharpton.
Yes, sir.
And the core of National Action Network is Black pastors. And some of the great Black pastors in the country today are on the board of the National Action Network. And they have a tremendous social consciousness.
Yes, sir.
And so that's one place. There are also pastors on the board of NAACP.
Yes, sir.
There are pastors, the Conference of National Black Churches, where I also chair, is made up of pastors. And then the Conference of National Black Churches is the coming together denominations for public policy and social justice.
Yes, sir.
It has nothing to do with theology. It's that churches cannot afford to sponsor effective social action, social justice action, separated. Because most of the resources of the churches go into maintaining the machinery of the church.
Yes, sir.
They don't have excess left over to do social justice. But in our coming together, we're able to do that. And so all of those entities I'm telling you about just now were involved in this getting the vote out, this enormous vote out that went out. The Conference of National Black Churches partnered with National Action Network, and we sponsored staff in 8 of the battleground states to get the vote out to make sure that our people participated in the process.
Yes, sir.
And so I think that still is alive in Detroit, one of the great places of support for Southern activity, and one of the great conscious communities in the North who've had to fight, as we saw in this last election, who had to fight blatant racism in the North.
Yes, sir.
In Detroit.
Yes, sir.
So the fight is going on, and if people are awakened to it, you'll see that it ain't the Southern fight. It's a national fight.
Up here now, yes, sir.
It's a national fight, Doc.
Yes, sir. Our friend, Dr. Stephen Bland in Detroit was really involved in that and became somewhat of the spokesperson for that. And you're right, that issue in Detroit, Wayne County, that up in Flint throughout, it just goes to show that what Dr. King said is true. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I want to go back to the book, and I know this will sound in some ways disconnected, but it all is. One of the things that blessed me in reading your book, and I think I read it in 2 days. I just started that afternoon, read it till after midnight, picked it up again the next evening, because once I started, it was riveting. You talk about your academic journey. And the story about your mother, when you showed her your diploma and she chuckled, didn't even spell your name. I almost fell out of my bed laughing. Nobody can humble you like your mama.
That's right,
So there may be some young people who see the Reverend Dr. W. Franklyn Richardson, and he seems as though he's a person who's at a place unattainable. Your willingness to be transparent throughout the book, your hurts, your disappointments, your campaign for president of the convention, other things that you lay your soul bare in this book in ways most Black men don't, and certainly not Black preachers. What would you say to a young person who says, I'm not college material, that's not for me? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say, first of all, that is a social condition that people impose upon black young people, and it was imposed upon me, and probably more blatantly then than now. But when I went to West Philadelphia High School, they believed in social promotion. So if you kept yourself out of trouble, didn't say nothing, you get promoted whether you hadn't earned the credentials for that next promotion or not. So, as long as you wasn't causing no confusion, you had move you right along.
Yes, sir.
So when I got to the 10th grade, I was aspiring to be a doctor. I went in to see my counselor, Mr. Driven, who was a white man. He said to me, "You are not college material," and that hurt me real bad. And but you know, Doc, when he said that I was not college material, that hurt me. But after I got away from it and looked back over my journey, he was not lying. I was not college material because they had not prepared me for college.
Come on.
But I was determined I had a good self-esteem.
Yes, sir.
About myself, and I still believe I was going to college. I went to West Philadelphia Community College and flunked out. And then went back to my pastor. I told him I wanted to preach, and I told him I wanted to get prepared. He said, well, I'm going to send you down to Virginia Union. I went to Virginia Union. They tested me, and they said, we're going to give you a conditional matriculation. And we will put you in remediation for a year. And if you can make it 1 year, we will let you stay.
Yes, sir.
Long story short is I stayed, went on to Yale, earned a doctor's degree at United, went around the world, did things. 35 years later, this conditional matriculant is now the chairman of the board of Virginia Union, and every degree has my signature on it.
Has your signature on it.
Yeah. So, you talk about the grace of God.
Yes, sir.
And I say that as not a brag. I say that to say to young people, don't let anybody obstruct your ambition, and don't let the obstacles that you have in your way stop you from aspiring beyond the circumstance that you find yourself in.
Yes, sir.
And so I really want that to be clear, that you don't let your destination be determined by your situation.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Rise from your situation.
Yes, sir.
Aspire past your situation. And so that is my journey in terms of education, overcoming educational obstacles. I had them, but by God's grace, when I think about coming from a place where I couldn't read,
yes, sir,
to last week becoming a #1 bestseller on Amazon, Doc, that's a long journey.
That's a long journey, Doc. That's a long journey. That's a long journey. I want to close. I could do this for 2 hours, but they would throw us both off of this thing. And I want to close asking you to risk transparency one more time. You talked about your battle with illness and how severe that was. And you were very honest in talking about that in the book. And of course, we mentioned just in passing, your desire to become president of the National Baptist Convention. I was in Tampa, you remember, that year, because I wanted to see you move up. And I told Booth, I'm going to and because in you, and I don't think you will mind me saying this, you belong to more than just the Baptist communion.
Right.
So many of us, I'm Church of God, but so many in the Church of God in Christ, in the AME Zion, my late uncle, Dr. Calvin Bromley Marshall.
Yeah.
So much. He thought you and Reverend Al Sharpton were the cat's meow.
Yeah.
He loved you both so much. But you belonged to so many. I remember when you were selected to preach that Christmas Eve service that was aired on, was it NBC?
ABC.
ABC. I remember, Booth and I used to laugh about this. I can see you in that black robe with the red panels. I still remember.
God Almighty.
You were a hero to us in so many ways, and it cut across denominational lines. So talk to us about navigating the valleys.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You talk about it in the book.
You're right, Doctor. Let me tell you, one cannot see grace going forward. We go forward by faith.
Yes, sir.
We're looking where we're headed.
Yes.
And by faith, we keep going, believing we're going to get there. But you can only see grace when you look back over your shoulder and see what you've been through and how the Lord got you through. And for me, the things the peaks are not testaments to grace. The pits are.
Yes.
Where you're down and out, you don't know where to go, and you come out and you look back and say, God had his fingerprint was all over that. So even in the National Baptist Convention, when I so disappointed by that and felt so assaulted by the process and left there, it turned my theology, it turned my faith upside down. And but as I got past that and looked back over, I saw where God had something more in store for me. I said this in the book, that Manuel Scott, who was another mentor to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When I was running for president, he said to me, Rich, I said, Doc, I knew he was going to vote for me because he's been such an advocate for me. He taught me he gave me my first instance to not preach with manuscript.
That's right.
So I just knew he was going to be supported. He said, no, I'm not voting for you. I'm going to vote for Caesar Clarke. I said, what? I said, what do you mean, Doc? How can you do that? And he said, Rich, these people never going to elect you president. I said, what? He said, because your potential and vision is too big for this group. That's what he said to me. And I was so mad at him saying it. But as the time unfolded, I saw that God that's what he said. He said, God's got other things for you, Rich.
Talk, sir.
That's what he said.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And so, and one day I was in a meeting, John Bryant.
Yes, sir.
Bishop John Bryant.
Yes, sir.
And I are colleagues, and we kind of grew together. And years ago, we talked about what we wanted to be in our careers. He wanted to be a bishop in the AME church, and I wanted to be president of the National Baptist Convention, and different ones were sharing. And he said to me one day, he was a head of the AME church, and I was chairman of the Conference of National Black Churches. And he said to me, he said, Rich, those folks in the National Baptist Convention, they wouldn't make you president, but now look at you today, you president of all of us.
There you everybody.
Yeah, so he said,
Yes,
so you see, what I'm trying to say is that whatever you're going through, don't conclude that it is your destruction. It may be a setback for a setup. That's what they say.
Wow.
God may getting you ready for something much better
Yes,
than what you thought you were after. And when I look over my life and see the things that God has done, being president of the National Baptist Convention seems very small to what the Lord has done in my long journey.
Yes,
and doors he's opened and opportunities he's given. When I was in the hospital, which was the birth of this book idea, which I told you, man, I remember rolling down that hallway and just having to turn it over to God. Let it go and let him have it.
yes, sir.
So the pit place, and I've had pits, but they made me strong, Doc. My trials, that song says, my trials come to make me strong.
Yes, sir.
And I'm a living evidence of the fact that heartache and trouble can usher you to where God can use you better and bless you in more ways than that.
Wow. Listen, I could talk to you all day, and I know that anyone who watches this is going to be blessed by your story because you dared to tell the truth.
Thank you.
And we need truth tellers. Now more than ever, we need to see a W. Franklyn Richardson because we need to know God is still able.
Yes, sir.
And you are a testament and a testimony to that. And I just want to thank you for your modeling ministry for all of us, for your allowing me to be within the circle of your influence and your impact, for what you mean to the kingdom and to the church. And I just want to encourage everyone watching, go to Amazon and purchase. Listen, it's Christmas time. Don't just get one for yourself. Buy several. Get one for your pastor. If there's a young preacher in your congregation, young man or young woman, getting ready to go to Bible college, seminary, buy them one. Buy your associates one. Get them in the hands of people. It is one of the greatest autobiographies, but it's also a treatise on the current climate of our culture and of the church. It's a witness to grace, a testimony of favor by the Reverend Dr. W. Franklyn Richardson. I love you, bro. Thank you for sharing with us.
I love you too, Bishop. You take care of yourself, man.
Witness to Grace, a testimony of favor is available for purchase. Get your copy today from Amazon